Hey guys, welcome back to the Runaround here on ESPN 1300. We're talking about Olympic track action. This is Greg Jubb alongside Brad Jager and Ryan McGrath. The show is brought to you by Halliburton Sports. Check them out online, halliburtonsports.com. Anyway, we had a contest. Speaking of Halliburton Sports, the Go for the Gold contest that we were promoting here on the radio show. And the whole point of the show, the whole point of the contest was to predict how many medals you thought the U.S. track and field team was going to bring home, and in case of a tiebreaker, predict how many gold medals you thought they were going to bring home. Not the hard concept, but to do it is impressive. Our winner, I want to give a quick shout out. Maybe he's so familiar with gold medals that he knew it so well. Vince Ciotti from Perry Hall, the state champion in the 1600 and 3200, a 4:15 miler as a junior. He won. He predicted 29 medals.
Wow.
Exactly, in the tiebreaker. Now, we had 3 people predict 29 medals, but Vince won the tiebreaker. He predicted 10. Now, the final gold medal count for the U.S. was 9. So, if he had that perfect prediction, I would have to throw in another prize. So
that was a difference of 1, Greg.
Yeah.
Brad does math. Higher math at that. So, congrats to Vince. We'll be in touch.
And bringing up the medal count, actually, that's a good point. So, Team USA's original goal was 30, and they did hit 29. I felt I actually, when I was going through my own, I kind of thought 31 was going to be our highest. And there were a couple on the men's side that didn't happen that I thought might, a couple on the women's side that were surprises. But all in all, 29, great improvement from Beijing, and I think certainly back in the right direction. You look at Allison Felix getting a handful. Just the women's team was so dominant in general.
Yes, and when you're watching the medal count, it's brought to you by McDonald's, of course, as we learned. You're wondering, where's China getting all these medals? And then everyone's saying, why are we behind? They're behind like
because
3 medals.
About 32 different forms of badminton and table tennis. And dive. I mean, if you watch the diving, the gymnastics, and men's gymnastics, women's gymnastics, men's diving, women's diving, there's just so many events, and even just like track, there's about 75 events that we're not going to get to talk about. But one that we need to talk about for sure is the men's marathon, which was on Sunday morning. Now, when you looked at it on paper, it really looked like a 2-team battle, 3 Kenyans, 3 Ethiopians, just based on times. It didn't look like the Americans were really going to factor in. And, early in the race, American Ryan Hall pulling off to the side and dropping out. Everyone's going, what's wrong with Ryan Hall now? Apparently it was a hamstring issue, which was not among the list of pre-race injuries that he had cited, the main being plantar fasciitis. But Abdi Abdurrahman also dropped out, and I still hadn't heard why he did. But look at the performance of American Meb Keflezighi. And, of course, Meb, great American story, how his family came from Eritrea, just moved to San Diego. And he whittled his way from 15th, 16th, somewhere in there, down to 4th place by the end. So he's done 2 Olympics. He finished 2nd in 04, 4th this year. What a great race for him.
That seems to be the theme of how to kind of sneak into the medal podium. And, oh my God, Dina Castor, I almost forgot her name.
Dina Castor.
Forgive me. How can you forget that name? She whittled her way down. She was probably back in 20th. She took a very relaxed first half marathon. I remember watching it. I remember exactly where I was because I thought it was such a unique moment. And I was, 15 at the time? I loved it. That's what got me into running. I remember watching her do that. She just slowly creeped her way up. And the reason why, that's also a smart tactic as well, because that course had so many turns. That was a big complaint about the course.
92. Yeah. 92 turns. There was 1 complete U-turn. The race course was so narrow, the cars, the motorbikes were having trouble negotiating the turns. And after a while, that really takes its toll on your hips and your knees, and just the overall pace.
They were going over cobblestones at points?
Yes, and if you look at how the race was run, you had Wilson Kipsang, who was probably the pre-race favorite, throw down a 14:11 from 10 to 15K, super early. If that move stuck, would have been seen as a genius. He had a little bit of a gap over a small, and narrowing pack, which included the other Kenyans. The Ethiopians were starting to fade. 2 of them dropped out. 1 finished outside the top 75. But you had one tough guy in Stephen Kiprotich from Uganda. And as you're watching this race, you can't help but think, I hope this guy does well. I have no rooting interest here, really. But the way he was running, and he and Karui eventually catch up to Kipsang. And Stephen Kiprotich from Uganda just kind of floated second or two off the back of this little pack, and they kept testing him, throwing in little surges here and there. Now you know, and you guys know, if you've ever put in a surge that early in a race, you're not going to have another one. You know, you just don't have another 14:11 5K in you. And watching him, Kiprotich from Uganda, take off, it was so exciting. I don't know about you guys. I watched it live. I got up early, you know, had my donuts in hand, and was just watching, and it was just such a cool race to watch.
I think when you make such a definitive move like that, like you said, it's a be-all, end-all move. When you make that move, you're trying to break the field. From 10 to 15K in an event that is 42 kilometers long, that's a little bit earlier than most moves are made. You see a lot of those moves somewhere around the half marathon mark. And I just thought with how much of a toll that course can take on these runners, that might have been early. But nonetheless, Kiprotich, story of the day, by far. And it's always cool. I love ending the Olympics on a good note. The marathon is always that premier event. It's the last event.
I woke up in about maybe an hour into the race, a little bit less than an hour into the race, and I hadn't heard that it was a 3-lap race over the same course. I thought it was a 26-mile point-to-point race or something like that. And so I'm watching the race, and all of a sudden I go get my bowl of cereal, I come back, and they're going past the same point again. I go, is this a replay? Did I miss something on this thing? What do you guys think about a loop course like that?
I think for Olympic competitions and anywhere where you have spectators and spectator support, it's absolutely the way to go. If you had stretched that course out, you know, even to have run just the London Marathon course, right. You know, you see it in triathlon. They do, you know, they might do 5K loops for a 40K bike. So 8 times around, you're seeing them. You know, any sort of big race like that just benefits from the loop format. But you're right. In this case, the course was flat as a pancake, but technically challenging. And I don't think people. You watch them negotiate the turns, and you could see who was really getting tired.
You know, and also concerning the Olympics, you're running for place. You go to marathons in like Berlin or Rotterdam or something like that. They're going for time. For something like this, yeah, it's the great equalizer of the field. Everyone's got to do it. Right. So I don't see any issue with that. But for the women's marathon, on the other hand, where it rained, a lot of runners were complaining of cramping, and there was a lot of casualties in that race as well. So that's the only downside. If the conditions aren't ideal, sometimes that happens.
But it was warm. You know, the temp was around 70. The start time was 11 a.m., so a little bit later than you would have, and that was mostly to accommodate us East Coast viewers and some of the other, you know, spectators.
Still better than the 95 degrees, I believe it was in Beijing.
Probably a little bit nicer, a little less pollution maybe.
And we were talking about Morgan Houston dropping out of the 1500. What about the marathon for a race like this, about dropping out? If you don't have a chance at the top 4 or 5, and you have maybe another marathon that you might want to run for money in a month, you just drop out and say, well, I'm not going to make it. Why kill myself?
Well, I think it's a disheartening point. But of course, you know, as one of the big things that most of the Olympic athletes have been very vocal about is demanding change for you know, how they're compensated. And you know, I won't say that they're not being paid to go to the Olympics. Someone like Ryan Hall, his sponsors are kicking in, so it's not like he's not making any sort of money by being there. But right, if he feels like, hey, I'm out of it, today's not my day, I'm going to try and race Chicago or New York in the fall, and I believe he is doing New York because I'm doing New York, and I think I remember there's a theme where he just copies my race schedule. You know, I don't think that's a valid excuse. I think if you qualified to run the Olympics and you are representing America, you finish the race, unless you are seriously just too injured to go on, because as Brad pointed out, it is 26 miles, not 1,500 meters. And it's a lot of wear and tear on your body.
Yeah, I'll never forget, speaking of 2004, I brought up Tina Castor. When Paula Radcliffe dropped out, it's a big deal. You know, Great Britain gave her, it's a different animal. The marathon is just a different animal than track and field. Sometimes I forget that the marathon's a part of this track and field umbrella when it comes to the Olympics. It's a completely different race. And we were comparing over the break, what's it like dropping out or not finishing a 1500 versus a marathon? Yes, completely agree. If you're 2 minutes behind the pack and it's just not what you want, if you're not in the medal contention, then yeah, I understand that.
And how about them not finishing the race inside the stadium this year? That's what I miss,
yeah.
You know, when having everybody cheering and stuff for you like that.
And I think the reason there was just to make it go by Buckingham Palace, like the whole reason that the marathon is extra 384 yards or whatever is because of Buckingham Palace. So I guess that's why that was that way, but again, should be in the stadium.
Was the Queen hanging out the window waving?
I don't think she was. Kate Middleton was there a lot, though. That was not an unfortunate thing at all.
I'm surprised she didn't run the marathon herself,
She
honestly.
was at every event, I swear.
thank
And
goodness.
Greg, what about the 110 hurdles for the 100-meter hurdles? I'm sorry, for the women.
Yes,
You, wanted
the
to
big
point out.
names. You know, Tom from New Jersey brought up social media was a big deal at the Olympics this year. And by the way, congrats. Ryan McGrath, our very own co-host of the Runaround, successfully implemented his media blackout. Did not
17
get any.
days.
Did not get
Challenging.
any of the results ahead of the actual broadcast
I'm
times
so
from NBC.
proud.
It's
was
a
hard.
big deal.
I have
It is a
serious
big deal.
Olympic fatigue. I have not been to bed before 1 a.m. in weeks, and I'm so tired.
Olympic lag.
Olympic leg.
Anyway, but the 100 hurdles. Lolo Jones, maybe you've heard of her. Maybe you haven't. But she's another one of those names like Usain Bolt that just, she's made a name for herself, a very marketable athlete, and one of the world's best hurdlers. Bottom line is, she did not have the best season that this year. She did not do as well as really she was hoping, her coach was hoping, or as our tradition or as her past successes would indicate. But she got fourth in the 100 hurdle finals. But she was fourth behind two of her American teammates. Kelly Wells got third. Dawn Harper got second to Sally Pearson from Australia, who has been one of the most dominant hurdlers in world history. And it was such a close race. I was honestly expecting Sally Pearson, she ran, I believe, 12.28 seconds in the semis. Absolutely killed it. And then ran 12.35 in the finals, which is one of the fastest times in Olympic history. But Dawn Harper was right on her. Right on her. And honestly, she'd been receiving a lot of flack saying, did she earn her 2008 Olympic gold medal? Dawn Harper of the United States was 2008 gold medalist in the 100 hurdles because Lolo Jones tripped over that 7th or 8th hurdle and lost the lead, or 9th hurdle.
I would say, Sally Pearson has been so dominant. If anyone other than her won, I would have been upset. I think, the Olympics for her are just a validation of a great run of 2 years. I hope now she goes for the world record and really makes a push. Dawn Harper, Kelly Wells, awesome races for them. Lolo Jones at 4th, that is an awesome result, and she might be disappointed with it because everyone goes there thinking they can medal or get gold. But she has to look at where she's come and be realistic. She should not have made the American team.
She just snuck in.
Barely made it.
If you were watching the Olympic trials, she was thrilled. She was jumping around going crazy because she made the Olympic team.
She's come a long way in a fairly short season, and she should be very thrilled. And the whole thing about her marketability, what I would say is, as Lord Sebastian Coe said, the more you Twitter, the worse you run.
Yeah,
And I'll leave it at that.
And she's marketable, more power to her, she can do it. I mean, if the other ladies are jealous of her, too bad.
Anyway, this is the Runaround on ESPN 1300, and I'm ashamed to say it, but everything we've been talking to since our 7 months on the air has been leading up to the Olympic Games. So we're going to refocus after this now. We're going to be talking about the cross-country season starting up, as well as some local road races and the triathlon season. A lot of good stuff to talk about. Anyway, follow us on Twitter at Runaround ESPN, and be sure to get on Facebook, click like, visit the Runaround on ESPN Radio. Tell us what you want to hear on the show. Brad, you have something to say.
My thought of the day, get well milky.
Yeah. Best of luck to Brad's cat. I wish her the best. But anyway.
And I would, what I would challenge our viewers to, or listeners to get on Facebook and tell us who you thought the most dominant athlete was at these games. Dominant.
Please, drop us a line, ESPN, the Runaround on ESPN. Be tuned next week, 12 o'clock,
Dominant.
Runaround.
Dominant.